Welcome, everyone, to the Revenue Architect Podcast. This podcast is tailored for revenue leaders navigating the evolving landscape of sales, RevOps, and revenue management. Today, we have a special guest, Michael Roth, Chief Revenue Officer of Digital Wealth at InvestCloud, a 2024 CNBC World's Top FinTech company and a global leader in wealth technology, driving the digital transformation of the wealth management industry. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate it, Jay.
Yeah, Michael, welcome.
We want to get a quick rundown of your background. How did you
Oh, yeah.
get to be a CRO? Start way back at college or however you
I,
feel. Let's take a quick run.
I didn't wake up one day and say I want to be a CRO. It just manifested. At a young age, I was always interested in finance and just bluntly making money. Really focused on the trading space. So I was a derivative trader for about a decade. At 14, I wanted to do that job. I finished undergrad a year early just to be able to jump in and get going quicker. It was literally my dream job. Did it for about a decade. After I got my MBA, I started to really want to build something and create something that lasted. That's how I got into the startup world. And with a couple of co-founders, we built and sold a retirement technology platform. I've been in the financial services, financial technology space for over 20 years. From there, when I sold it to InvestCloud, which is where I'm the CRO of Digital Wealth, that's how I manifested into the role. Before then, I actually had a lot of other roles from CEO to president of planning to chief product officer. I had different elements. The revenue role was brought to me by our CEO at InvestCloud and said, we need someone in this role. We need someone in this position with certain type of skill sets. And I guess he thought I had those skill sets. That's how I got here today.
Awesome. When we talked earlier, you said you've talked about growing up around successful business leaders
Yeah.
and learning by observing. How did those early experiences in your trading years shape the kind of CEO you became later, especially in the high stakes fintech environment?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. Number one, I went to the wealthiest public school in the state of Minnesota, but I did not live in that environment. Actually, got what's called open enrollment. So I would drive into the wealthy area and then drive back outside of the wealthy area. So a lot of my role models were my friends' parents. They had nice, beautiful homes on the Lake Minnetonka. Instead of hanging out with my friends, I would wake up early and go for a walk with the dads on sleepovers or go on trips with them and spend more time with the dad, just asking a lot of questions, observing how they made decisions, observing their lifestyle, where they did spend money, where they didn't spend money, how they thought, the process there. That really created a massive urge in me and hunger to replicate where they got to in my own way. That's what drove me initially into trading and then into the fintech world. What was nice about that was I got a lot of different experiences of different styles of work, and they all really were relevant to the financial services space. One of my main mentors was the top financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group. Another one was a top consultant. I got a lot of different lenses and a way to solve problems, the way to think, the way to react with people.
Michael, it's an inspiring story, to be honest. My Steve might have heard it 100 times by now, but one of my friend gave me a book long time in 2005 when I was boarding a flight from London back to India. And the book was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert
Ah,
Kiyosaki. It resonates me with that story because he said the same thing. His dad, who was really in government with high paying job, he used to call them poor dad versus his friend's dad, who was poor, literally, but was continuously investing in assets and building things. That shaped up Robert's career, saying that having a high paying job is not the success or is not what aligned towards building really a long-term wealth. It is building these assets. What I heard from you sounds really good, and he has a couple of books. But when you landed up becoming a founder and sold a couple of companies, I want to ask you ultimately where he says you need to jump from left side to the right side of the quadrant, right? Become the founder and ultimately
yeah.
become the investor. My question to you is, you built a company, you got funding, you sold the company. I heard you also went through a couple of bankruptcies, right? The question is, how did you keep up and how did you remain adaptable?
It's the one of the top questions. One of my mentors is an individual named Rob Havart. One day I woke up, this was actually after that, but I'm like, what do you do when you don't know what to do? He's like, believe. Looking back,
Oh,
it's people who've never been through it, who are maybe just still in academia or just been a W-2 their whole life. They don't understand that concept. They're like, that sounds so mystical. But fundamentally, when you are building a business or creating a distribution out of scratch, it doesn't exist. You don't have a big brand name behind you to go and penetrate. So you actually have to believe that what's in the future is getting manifested today. One of my favorite futurists says that the choices you make today are the material that create the future of tomorrow. That was the reality of what I kept saying to myself. It doesn't mean I didn't wake up and have to fight doubt, fight thoughts. A lot of what you're fighting too is people look at you with pity. They're like, oh, look at that poor chap. He's doing his best. You know what? But he's not successful. And they're right until they're not. It's that believing component that I think really drove me, believing that this could happen. Just because someone hasn't done it yesterday or today doesn't mean I can't do it tomorrow.
That's interesting.
What I was going to say is I very resonate with it because I started my company pretty late in my life, right? I was 45 plus when I started, and all my friends said the same thing. And maybe they might be still laughing out loud now that laughter has come down. They used to say the same thing. You had a great job, a nice life. Why do you want to leave all that, get up at 5 a.m. and struggle through it? And you don't know if you're going to make a payroll, you're going to pay your mortgage. Why do you want to go through all of that? I didn't have an answer, to be honest with you. I didn't have an answer. Sometimes I used to doubt myself also. Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, of course.
I think what you said really resonated. Ultimately matters to your vision, to your passion, to what you are looking forward towards and what is making you happy. Making you happy is not always easy money or staying in a comfortable situation. I'm comfortable in a comfortable situation. That's my problem. Even in my business, it happens. Steve knows it so well.
If we don't have challenge, we're like, what's life? This is so boring.
Oh, absolutely.
Just go to work and that's all I have to do and then go home. This is not for me. Yeah.
It's a good trait to have, but we drive ourselves nuts.
Actually, let's talk about the going nuts. You've done all kinds of fundraising from seed to venture capital to private equity. None of those are the same, and they all have their own chaos in them. Walk us through the emotional and leadership journey of actually going through fundraising in each of those. What did you learn about resilience, backers, finding the right investors versus just finding capital? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, a lot of learnings, a lot of mistakes, to be frank. I got lucky with the seed funding round because I found true seed funding investors. If you're a seed funder and you're raising money for seed, you don't have a model. You don't have a proven record. A lot of times you don't even have an MVP. You're kind of like, I have this idea. This is where we're trying to go. If you're lucky, you have an MVP to show and say, this is kind of what it would look like. Who are you going to sell to? I think this. I don't know what the pricing is yet. All that's tested. You need someone fundamentally that trusts you, who believes in you. It's beyond like a model. It's more beyond that. It's that relationship element that they say, hey, I believe you. I'm going to back you. I know the risk, and that's okay. That seed funding source, the main one, I had to come back to. We almost went bankrupt 4 times. And the first several times, we didn't have a large fund to back up on. So I had to retell that story, rebuild that vision, show the progress, even though the progress wasn't shown from a dollar value, and still say, hey, we're going to make this happen, and have that belief and confidence that I could transfer to those individuals. The seed funding round is very different. When you move into the venture capital round, you have some proven concepts. You have most likely an anchor client or clients, plural, depending on when you raise, if it's growth or earlier on. That conversation is more, okay, here are my proof points. Yes, we're still burning money, but here are our proof points. Here are the areas where we can double down on if we go after it. I just need your support and your backing. In that raise, I looked more for a strategic VC who actually knew the space, because then I felt like I could augment their kind of brand to help me get in the door. I won't get into it, but a lot of learnings from the venture capital side on who you're dealing with, different personalities. Some are sharks. Some actually want what's best for you. Some are just more focused on the money. That is probably one of the biggest things to look out for. When you get into the private equity side, it is 1 + 1 = 3. That's it. Just tell me how 1 + 1 = 3, and we move on.
That feels so real.
I have a follow-up question. How would a founder look at from seed to VC to private equity, right? What to expect, what to get ready for, how to navigate that?
What to expect from, like, what are you going to leverage the resources for, or what to expect with that interaction, that relationship?
With that relationship, because you have never done it. First time you're going in front of either a seed or a VC or a private equity. So what's the difference? What do you expect? How do you navigate that landscape?
Yeah, it's a common theme. They say Mark Andreessen, who's the co-founder of AZ16, which is one of the top performing venture capital firms in the country and the globe. He always says there's too much VC money in the space. It's a very funny thing. When you go to seed funding, it's a little bit more difficult in the sense that you need to get belief from
Mhm.
individuals to put up a certain amount of money, and you don't have a proven record, right? You're saying you don't have a proven thesis yet with the components, but they trust you and believe in you, so you can raise it. But losing friends' money, family's money, those are really big situational issues. Personally, what I like to do is find almost like a mentor to do the seed funding who's successful in businesses, understands the risk, understands the
Mhm.
emotional up and downs, then that relationship is better. But I would not want them to think they have any type of hands-on operational element there. Keeping the distance is important. But when you get to the venture capital firm, it really matters how successful you are, right? You're not going to get
Mhm.
AZ16 if your idea doesn't have the scale that they need. You may have to look at a more local venture capital firm in the Midwest or something like that. That relationship and what to expect from the venture capital firm there. Hopefully, some of the top VCs, even the smaller ones, are going to provide expertise nowadays because they're competing with each other. They're coming in and helping you and providing that value as they step into that relationship investment. So typically, there's enough money out there to get. A lot
Mhm.
of times, venture capitalists, they're competing with each other, especially if your product and the opportunity is big. It's more, okay, what do I need from the venture capital firm? Money I can get. What expertise do I need? What access do I
Yeah.
need? What
Mhm.
distribution do I need? That's the way I would look at that relationship.
How about private equities?
Actually, to be fair, I've been fortunate because I've worked with a phenomenal private equity firm called Motive Partners. They do have belief and still want to change the world and not just monetize it.
Mhm.
Obviously, they want
Mhm.
high returns. They do
Mhm.
have a belief there. I was listening to the private equity firm Bravo's CEO, and he was talking about how the evolution of private equity has really changed. In 80s, 90s, maybe in the early 2000s, private equity really was come in, strip out everything, lower the cost, and get
Mhm.
that EBITDA and drive it, pop it up. Now, a lot of the private equity firms that are coming in are having to show the value that they're providing. The tech space is extremely expensive. They're paying pretty big multiples, 6 to 8x, and that can get higher on the revenue to get into the door. The debt on that's roughly around 2 to 3x. They start out 50% in the hole a lot of times. In order to him to hit that 3x multiple that private equity needs, they really need to look and reevaluate and work well with the operating partners. With the private equity, it's more of, okay, guys, let's have an honest conversation. What's the TAM? Where can we go
Mhm.
after? Where are we weak? What employees are all stars? What are B players and what are C players? Let's make that decision from the beginning so that moving forward, there's not fear and anxiety in the culture because that's what happens when PE comes in. There is fear and anxiety because they're worried about cost cutting and they
Oh,
think that's
yeah.
all they want to do.
All the Thank you, Michael. It was so insightful. I think one or two people might have full understanding as you have of all of these three stages and gone through it.
Usually, everyone as an entrepreneur is so hungry for money that they don't
Yeah,
think as
too much.
critically about, am I getting it from the right place? Is this
Yeah. Yeah.
VC going to shark me out of my business? Is this private equity going to carve it apart, or are they actually going to be a partner? Actually, you get to say no to money
You do.
when
You do.
you're in the middle of, I need money, like right now, which is a real challenge. As you're moving through growing a business, how do you balance the fundamentals of process and principle? Especially as a founder, you don't like operations as much.
The
And
typical
we've,
CRO, you can say it.
yeah, I understand. I am that way too. Operations is not my best thing,
Yeah.
but you still have to scale the systems. You got to build the
You do.
teams and build some governance without killing the innovations. How do you balance the fundamental on this as a leader, the way you and I are more designed?
It's not an easy answer. I just wrote a piece on my LinkedIn about you can believe in fundamentals without being a fundamentalist. I talk about the idea that if you look at the premier athletes, the premier tennis players like Pete Sampras, or the premier artists like Da Vinci, they know the fundamentals. They've spent a lot of time with the fundamentals. They know though when you need to be creative around them and when it's time to go after them instead of just being black and white. This is the way the world works because it's not.
Mhm.
The economy's
Mm.
dynamic, people are emotional, situations change, innovations happen. When you look at the sales and the CRO role, especially when you get to a CRO title, typically that is what you brought in to do, generate revenue and create scalability, structure, and process. If you ever dealt with salespeople, most of them really don't want a lot of process. They want you to
Mhm.
trust them. They want to own their calendar. They want to own
Yeah.
the way they do things, and they want to show you the results. That is great if you're hiring 100% of the time A plus players and they all are making you so much money that the margin is made up for. But it's just not realistic. It's too much risk. And a lot of times the process can help the top A players in that process. What you have to understand is you create guidelines and guardrails to who you're working with. What is that team culture? Who are the salespeople that are working within this process structure? Where are areas that they feel constrained, and where are the areas that they need help to move that forward? Common theme is like with Salesforce, right? Adoption is a massive issue with Salesforce, but it's extremely important not only for the organization and management, but for the sales rep to know and understand. We can glean information and data and insights from that. It also can drive automation for them. Maybe they don't forget about certain accounts they're going after. It's a tug and pull. The judicial branch and the executive branch going back and forth and saying,
Mhm.
okay, why are we creating this? Are we being fundamentalists on this? I was in a conversation where it's, we don't ever do this with our contracts. Then you go back to first principle. Why don't we ever do this with our contracts? It seems like this reason why we're changing it is not because of why we created that rule. Being open to those conversations, and that works. That means you're not just dealing with the sales team, though. You have to have a thinking and a paradigm from the operation side like that, from the finance, from lawyers. That kind of comes together.
Understood. There's a flexibility required, but you also build weaving into the culture. I always struggled against the policy person. Like I
Yeah.
point out the person who is always like, nope, it's got to
Yeah.
be. And I'm like, clients,
No, but I think
you never say that. I always say train salespeople. I do never want to hear policy come out of
No,
your mouth talking to a customer.
no.
This is what our options are. Might be the
yeah.
policy that I'm putting you through, but I'm not telling you the word. I was like, it's a negative word. I'll talk to you later after you use it.
You said it very nicely, which is you should understand why this policy is that way. If you're not fundamentally violating that, I think it is okay to bend around it or have an exception about that. If it is fundamentally violating the reason why we put that policy in place, then it's an honest conversation you need to have with your customer.
I give an example. Once I took my $3 to a movie, and I'm a big coffee drinker. I walk into the movie with a nitro cold brew from Starbucks. I know they don't have that drink. They don't have coffee. I walk in, and there's a big sign that says no outside drinks allowed. I have to teach my daughter, one, I have integrity, so I can't sneak it in. But number two, that doesn't mean I'm breaking the rules if I understand why don't they want me to bring this in? They want me to buy candy, buy popcorn. Totally get it. I walk in and the person who's checking me in, it says, hey, you can't have outside drinks. I said, absolutely understand. You're doing your job. Can I talk to your manager? He calls his manager, comes up, sir, you can't bring any drinks. I go, absolutely understand. Let me explain to you my rationale. I said, I have three daughters. I'm going to go over there and buy popcorn, candy, and I already bought premium movie ticket seats. I am the perfect ideal client from you. I'm going to come back consistently. How do we solve this problem? She looks around. She says, can you put it in a Diet Coke cup? I said, absolutely. The fundamental problem or principle was what? They want us to buy those drinks and they don't want other people to think we can sneak them in. Being a fundamentalist, they would have said no, but yes, you're still doing what we want. And
Great
the
example
nitro
of
is not
this.
served there, so we can't serve you as a client. So we'll welcome you in. It was the best lesson I could teach my 14-year-old.
Wow,
Yeah.
man. I'm going to steal your story. This is so cool.
Look at how much money I'm going to spend all summer long.
I'm also a Starbucks fan and I like specific drink in the theater. That's not something you get, right?
No.
I want to switch topics. We have heard, Michael, 100 times that revenue solves everything. Bring in money, things will go right. Yesterday, ironically, we were listening to a keynote of Gong, right? Their CRO, Russ, put up a slide. I don't know who did, but I think he did a slide called Zombie Companies. It's a beautiful slide. I took a picture of that. And that relates here because he said, you're making enough money, you're paying your bills, but
Yeah.
you don't have enough money in innovation and investment. You typically are just a zombie company, you will not grow. When it comes back to this revenue solves everything, I heard you did mention that it's the right revenue that solves right problems. So, how did this mindset change your approach to growth, forecasting, and deal velocity? Because these are typical challenges you have as a CRO.
It started actually about 10 years ago. I was doing a VC raise. I'm with the venture capital firm. I'm doing a raise, and they didn't end up investing with us. We had a great relationship. At the end of our conversation, we just had a good rapport. And I was young, so he's trying to teach me. He's like, Michael, before we leave, just remember one thing. I said, what? He's revenue solves every problem. I spent years saying that to people, and it was true-ish. It was a great method, bring in revenue. But what happens when that's your thesis and you start bringing in the wrong revenue? You get over your skis on doing deals that you shouldn't, that are not true to your ICP. What happens when your clients are unhappy because you did something that you're not investing in the future? Their experience with you is not premium. Your brand then dwindles and gets hit there. Obviously, the internal frustrations and issues of doing ad hoc things. Later, I had a mentor who's a serial entrepreneur, very successful in the tech space. I was walking with him, asking him questions. This was a couple of years ago. And I go, yeah, revenue solves every problem. And he just looks at me like that and goes, no, the right revenue solves every problem. I was like, what do you mean? It was a very obvious lesson, but I still like to ask, what do you mean? It comes back to exactly what you guys are talking about. If the revenue is destroying your margin and that's unintentional, you're not doing like a blitz scaling approach, that's not good revenue. If the ability is stretching your team too thin, where it's not scalable, it's not going to change your internal workings, that's not good revenue. If it's hurting your brand, that's not good revenue. It's really being disciplined to say no to revenue when it's not true to your strategy. When I was about 5 years into the startup world, I sold to a large insurance carrier. I was selling them a deal and I was testing the waters on this other idea I had. Jay, as an entrepreneur, Steve, you're like, what if we offered this? And they bit right away. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is new ACV for me. I took a step back and she's like, give me more on that. I didn't have anything more on that. I just had an idea and I brought it up. I went back and I thought in my head, I'm like, this isn't the best thing for my relationship with them. This idea will add value when I have more reach, but I don't have the reach they need for this to add value. I went back to the individual and told them, you know what? I think for you and your firm and where you're at today, let's wait. Let's get success from what we're providing you today. Let's revisit this a year from now. That really developed our relationship where they came back to me and asked, we're ready now to buy it. And we were ready to provide it. That was dumb luck on my sense. I think that is a good story to highlight that.
You stepped out and said it. Then you're like, oh crap, now we have to deliver. You were brave enough to go back and go, I can't deliver that yet. We're not ready for it. And it's because I care, I'm going to tell you no. That's brilliant. When you think about that, how do you help others understand good revenue? Because when you're selling, guys are selling, you might have a price seller, right? Sells by price. Margins are terrible. How do you help them understand the impact of good revenue?
Again, it ties back to your conversation about process fundamentals and also freedom. This is where process is extremely important. And this is where you really protect and have governance around it. Back to your last question regarding that. When I deal with salespeople, for example, oftentimes there's like this inherent belief because of their experience with other firms that finance is out to get them, strategic ops is out to get them, the lawyers are out to get them. I always stand back. I was on a call and I'm like, they tell my salespeople, we're all on the same team. They're doing their job and we want them to do their job. Otherwise, we will not have compliance, governance, and people won't trust our brand. We want them to do what they're doing and we want good revenue. That's what I always tell them. We want good revenue. When I help teach this with the salespeople, I bring them in. I have finance people that I trust. I have strategic op people that I trust. I have lawyers that I trust. We have a conversation around, and I say the same thing every single time when we're working on a deal. I go, we are all on the same team, and I want healthy bottom line revenue that is core to our strategy. What is that level? Where do we need to be at for that to be true? Once we have that number, how can we get there through the contract? How can we get there through the relationship? I'm very blunt in that conversation, but you have to work across parties.
One of our last podcasts we did with a RevOps specialist, she changed the commission field with a single button on her Salesforce. She immediately adjusted her profit margins because all the salespeople now couldn't cross this threshold. She set these guardrails, but worked it out from finance and others on the way back and then just made it a field. It might actually be rather good to show that here's what's going to happen to your commission if you make these changes. And you're like, oh, that sucks. Yeah. Might want to move that number. Can you sell a little higher?
That's a great method, right? I love that's a great story. I might steal it because it's very fair. You need that because we are in our lane focused and thinking about what we're doing best. As an entrepreneur, you're naturally more inclined to look at all the different elements and divisions. Culturally, organizations, especially incumbents, are teaching people to stay in their lane because that's how they optimize the experience. But it is a balance of putting in structures in place so the salespeople can run in a way they feel free, but it's also the benefit and valuing the business overall.
Thank you for that.
Let me move to my favorite question. And I think we only did the introduction because I come from a very hardcore technical background. Michael used to be a C++ programmer. So I used traveled through trading towards becoming a CEO and a CRO. I travel towards being a technical guy. If I do my work, go home, don't talk to me. To a guy where I need to be in the networking, talk to people and things like that. Every couple of years, there is a big shift that
Yeah.
happens in the market. And now we are in forefront of AI. Everybody is talking about it. You go Gong, you go Salesforce, you go everywhere. Everybody is saying that AI should reshape the entire sales and revenue operations. Revenue AI OS is what Gong also released yesterday. You also mentioned that there are 40 plus AI vendors, which also is causing a lot of nightmare towards data security. How are you approaching AI adoption responsibly across divisions like product, sales, ops, without creating these silos and risks?
That's a great view. I actually posted a small thought on that today in LinkedIn. One of what I said was actually one organization, one RA, did 41 POCs with 41 AI companies in a year. 41.
Oh,
That's one sample client. That doesn't even tell you how many AI companies are coming and have come into the market. All of the clients I've spoken with, all of the prospects I've spoken with, the funny thing is the number one problem they still need solved is data because AI is nothing without data. They're like, I need the data secure and clean, augmented by AI, and then I provide the technology on top of that. Where I've seen the market move in my space is it used to be best in breed technology, but then that became a massive ownership issue and it's very expensive. Then they moved to more of a platform approach, one
mhm,
vendor, two vendors. Now where I'm seeing is it's one core platform approach
mhm.
and then best of breed that has the workflow integration into that core platform. That helps get the cost down, but also control. Now, why I bring that up is I think it was Peter Thiel that said AI is communism and blockchain is libertarianism. The idea there is actually AI values and augments the larger firms in a lot of cases because they have all the data. They
Mm.
get the scale from it and the efficiencies that we just talked about and the optimization of that. The way InvestCloud, my firm currently, it's going to approach is like one, we have a head AI that runs it across all of the divisions. That is extremely important. That's a high respect I have for when our CEO stepped into his role. He made sure that was a core piece of our strategy. And that's very important because AI functions extremely well and you have the greatest ROI when it's on one platform. Then that platform owns it's the source of truth and owns the data, but then you can augment it with intelligence on the edges, right? You can then provide engines and things that augment it. The second reason, not just ROI, that's where you can protect the security. Imagine having 41 different vendors with different access points to data with AI. That is, to me, a nightmare. What we've looked at is okay, how do we make sure the data is not only secure for our company, but for our clients, obviously? What's the most intentional way? That's having that platform across the different divisions and then being very articulate and specific on where do you augment it with best of breed technologies that are core to your business strategy. How do you make sure you have the governance around it? It leads into how do we do that with salespeople or other individuals like designers who like freedom, like creativity? That comes back to that tug and pull of process versus freedom.
I think it must terrify a CISO to think all these systems are going to sign up. Who turned on the Copilot for that system? What has
Exactly.
it done? I have no idea where the data went. And
Yeah.
I do think you guys have much more of an advantage as more heavily regulated
Yeah.
because you're in the finance. Your
Yep.
data is probably cleaner.
Yep.
Any SaaS company that doesn't have that kind of restrictions might have data everywhere. Yours, it's got to be very structured for those reasons. There may be an advantage in the finance industry or healthcare others might have
Healthcare
to
has,
be able
yeah.
to take advantage of AI in better ways or broader ways than other companies with a lot more unstructured data.
It's
So,
interesting, the financial services space. You talk about, for example, Jay, you worked on C plus and you were an extreme coder. A lot of those systems and businesses were built on coding like COBOL, right? They still
Oh,
are
yeah.
running. There's a lot of data, but the reality is the financial services industry, for example, was created before the internet. That means that all the post tech companies like Mint, the Wealthfronts of the world, right? They have a definition of what a client was, but the pre-internet financial services companies, there's different definitions. Is it a product? Is it a household? Is it an individual? All those different conversations. There's still a lot of fragmentation, but there's huge opportunity that once they get that fragmentation centralized into a source of truth, then there's huge edge and huge opportunity for AI to benefit both the company and then the end investor.
Hey, the last thing we always like to ask this of our leaders, what advice would you give to someone who's working towards a CRO role? Thematic throughput for your life that you could say, this thing helped me. This is how I would advise you to try to lean in towards what it's going to take to become a successful CRO.
I think the number one thing is empathy. An empathetic person is always listening and not looking to speak. An empathetic person is always interested in what other people's problems are, not their own, always on the lookout to learn. I think empathy is massive in our space. Being empathetic to finance and ops, empathetic to the client, to the prospect, because that's when you actually start to listen and you can identify what the issue you're trying to solve. Reid Hoffman, who was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, says that don't start with the product and then try to find the community to sell that product into. Start with the community, identify the problem that you need to solve within that community, and build a product around that. That's really what you're doing as a CRO. You're in conversations all the time. If you look at product departments and CPOs and product managers, they actually are coming to the sales team, the front of the line, to say, what's the need in the market? What's the demand? Not a functionality checkbox, more of what's missing. That's really the value you can provide. Ops are coming, hey, how do we make this process more with the guardrails but still drive revenue? I think it's empathy that I would say in that case.
Excellent. Michael, thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
all of your amazing insights. I just think people will get so much out of this conversation. If you're watching this, we'd love for you to subscribe, like it, pass it along, send it through LinkedIn, share it with others. Help us to spread the word about what it takes to build a revenue management framework for your business using the wisdom of other revenue leaders. We thank you so much for coming, Michael.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Steve.